Welcome, this is Headlocks and Headphones. This is Martin Anderson. We hope that you're staying safe during the lockdown, and we hope that you're enjoying the weather in a safe way, despite the fact I'm already seeing some people just ignoring the lockdown and going out in the streets. Stop it! Just don't! It's not on! Either you follow the rules, or we all come and we send the big man round to your house to beat you up. Don't know who the big man is, but he sounds like a decent guy. On that note, we always record extra footage, and what we do is we normally throw it out. We don't use it. It seems like such a horrible waste, so why don't we use that footage? After we spoke about the Royal Rumble 1998, myself and Stuart decided we're going to just talk about something else, but still wrestling related. What we did was we tried to see how we could fix the wrestling business, and if it would be possible. One of those things where you think you have the answer, and every time you have the answer, it suddenly gets a little bit bigger, just like that Monty Python sketch. The only thing I have is my. So you see how very quickly it can grow from one thing to two things. Because this is the show after the show, things do tend to veer a little bit, and if I remember correctly, there may be a swear word in there. But this is what happens when we don't follow our rough guide and outline for what we're going to talk about.
Do you think booking committee wrestling is worse than when it was just, Vince Russo booking, or just, 1, 2, or 3, just a small team booking it?
I feel that they're not really getting into their job as much. Like, as you say, they're just being like, this is the main event. We're going to do all our time with this. Okay, we've only got an hour to prepare the show. But we're going to have, this is one part. Okay, let's concentrate on this. Okay, let's get this match done. Okay, that one's done. Okay, what about this one? Oh, it doesn't matter.
And now we've got 6 guys left and nothing for them to do.
Exactly. I think if you concentrate, like, if you've got 4 or 5 writers, you should have a couple of them on the main event, put 2 of them on 2 at the main event, 2 in the middle of the show, and give 1 or 2 guys the start of the show. Let these guys.
That's something I like about AEW. So I am heavily critical of the AEW product because I want it to improve. But when you look at the AEW product, Kenny Omega books the women's wrestling. Young Bucks book the tag team wrestling. Cody is basically in charge of the singles wrestling, but Chris Jericho obviously has a huge influence there. So you have a go-to, a person who's in charge. You look at the WWF, and what I see is, while AEW give people a lot of freedom, so if I, as a person with some radio background, if I'm actually hired to do a radio show, but then somebody hands me a script, why do you need me? You could literally go and hire anybody off the street. You've hired me to present a show. Don't hand me a script. Give me my playlist, my music, but the rest is up to me. And that's what I think is missing in wrestling. Now, when you look at ICW, I know Mark Dallas doesn't write shows on his own. I know that there is a very compact team that work together on those shows. But a lot of guys get given freedom. And I think we're scared of freedom. We're scared of the idea that at some point, we might go out there and say something that's wrong. People might not like the joke we make, or they might be offended. And I think that's something that I'm offended by people being offended. And just because I'm offended doesn't mean I'm right. And that's the whole point. Jim Cornette lost a job because he made a joke about people chasing chicken wings. Yet Jerry Lawler made a joke about Akira Tozawa doing a ramen noodle dive, which is, a bit offensive, really. But it's Jerry Lawler. He's 70. You're not going to fire him because he's just out of touch. I think people are just too easily offended.
I think if you're pushing people down the heel road, then let them have that little bit more freedom to offend people. It's their job. They're there to be the bad guy. Let them be hated for a reason. Instead of being like, oh no, you can't say that. But if you say this, we could get away with it.
Yeah.
No, let them.
I think the ECW stuff with the Dudleys was huge because you had people wanting to beat them up, and you had Bubba stepping out of the ropes, going down to the fan, and actually getting in their face and being like, "Hit me then, hit me, because if you hit me once, I'll kill you." And I think
He also went out and told a guy in a wheelchair to stand up.
yeah, I think I'm at the point, you know, where I like jokes that are offensive. I like things like, you know, non-alcoholic beer just isn't right. It's like going down on your sister. It tastes the same, but it's just not right. Or what did the father say to the paedophile on the beach? Get out of my son. Wow, right? That's deeply offensive to some people. It's also not actually all that funny. It's an attempt to push your button. And I think that, you know, Jimmy Carr, as a comedian, he loves to push your button. And I think that's funny. I think the idea of pushing your button, The Rock would constantly put people down. He couldn't get away with that now because he would be so heavily scripted. A lot of the stuff that he came up with in the flight. I mean, for me, the greatest moment I ever saw between The Rock and Mankind was not the birthday celebrations. It was not any of this stuff. It was when The Rock went to look at the crowd and raised his eyebrow and his glasses fell. And he, without thinking, bent down, picked them up, and handed them to him. And The Rock, live television, just went, "The Rock thanks you for that," and then carried on. I think performers are too scared. You look at a lot of the stuff that happened in these days, you know, Vader and Goldust didn't script their match. You can tell they wouldn't do it. They knew bits and bobs, they knew the finish, but you go out there and call it. You look at some of the guys who are working today, and you can almost see the point where there's a mess up, and then they suddenly can't remember the next part of the match, so they'll lock up, or they throw a few really weak and lame punches, and you can tell that's them trying to reset. You know, let's go again. I mean, the when NXT was pre-taped, they used to give wrestlers into trouble because they would attempt the same spot a second time, and it's like, you screwed up, just leave it. Scott Hall was one for when he messed up when he was Razor Ramon in WWF. He would look at the camera and he would go, "Take two." And he would look right in the camera and say, "Take two," so that Vince McMahon knew, you can cut that first one out and make me look good. And then when it got to live TV,
I would keep all that in. Keep the whole take two bit. It adds to realism.
and I think that's something I miss. In '98, I remember you had to tune into everything. Now I know there's a pandemic going on right now, so we won't look at the fact that I'm not watching modern wrestling right now. But before, I watched it because I talked about it for a wrestling show. There were weeks where I genuinely, 3 hours of Raw is a slog. So when it comes to SmackDown, every now and again, I'd stick it on and then I'd flick through some of it because the matches would be, you know, really bad. And then the thought of having to watch AEW, and then I'm tuning into Impact just to see what they're doing, and then getting mad at Sami Callihan because he's still breathing, and then tuning into Ring of Honor, and seeing the product they're putting out, which is, for me, is still, in terms of in-ring quality, Ring of Honor is still one of, if not the better promotions that are out there. The problem is they're run by a bunch of idiots. People, a TV station cannot run a wrestling show. I want to mention one thing quickly before we let you away. AEW is a company run by a person who's not a wrestling fan, not a wrestling promoter, rather. He is a wrestling fan, and he has billions. Here's somebody who, one of his players at Jacksonville Jaguars has actually come out and said that he's been held against his will. They tried to trade him when he didn't want it, and now he's been held against his will. And the owner of the company turned around and insulted him on Twitter. This is the person who's in charge of AEW. I can't remember the last time somebody tweeted something at Vince McMahon and he responded with, yeah, but smell your man's fingers, or whatever the insult is, because that's basically what Tony Khan does. He is a billionaire's son. He feels he can get away with anything. Yet Fulham are crumbling again, pre-pandemic. They're no force in English football, despite what he tells you. Jacksonville Jaguars, just a year ago, you had people burning stuff because they didn't burn jerseys. You look at when I look at the AEW product, I'm scared that people will tune into AEW and think that's exactly what wrestling is, not realizing that it's a type of wrestling. Just like I'm sometimes worried that people treat WWF the way that the WWE that they treat certain products, like Elastoplast in America, which is actually plasters, but Elastoplast is the brand. UFC is MMA. Coke is Coca-Cola, and I'm worried because I think AEW has some great wrestlers, but a weak product. And I'm interested in your opinion when you look at, because you've looked at 98's Royal Rumble and how it was booked, and you enjoyed the show. And I've brought up the idea that it's almost a transition between the traditional Bret Hart era and the more radical Stone Cold era. So there's a clear philosophy change in booking. Do you think that we're at a philosophy change in booking just now? Do you think AEW is the way the wrestling business is going to go? Or do you think that it's wrestling has kind of almost reached a point where there's very few directions left?
I think with the way that AEW is going, to me, it's kind of like WCW was. They've got a lot of older guys, which they seem to be more. Like, they just seem to be pushing the older guys more than they are the younger guys. And, like, to me, that's WCW. And
I think
why would you have
character? I mean, there's character development ideas in WWF where every person had a character. They had something for everybody. Nobody was just on the show for no reason. And a lot of times, I feel that happens in AEW. I mean, in WWF, you get WWE, you get it as well. People are just there for no reason, and I really do think that wrestling can be great when it's done really well. 1998 wrestling, when you watch it now, there's some things you go, I couldn't get away with that now. But then, why would you want to? I mean, it's a different age. I think I was watching Tom Green the other day, and I made a comment to my wife, the idea that Tom Green is responsible for social media. And mind blown, because I hadn't ever thought about this before. But Tom Green took the idea of a sketch show and he went on MTV with it, and he created Crash TV from the idea of Jerry Springer, of creating all these moments that can be replayed over and over again. Tom Green did these things on his show. So he had chat show elements. See, if you take all the chat show elements out and you cut up all the sketches and put them on, 2-minute long videos, that's Facebook. And I think WWF, WWE, AEW, they're still trying to do, 2-hour wrestling shows. I think there's a possibility of doing something vastly different, which I think we discussed this the last time we spoke. The idea that we need to change from what we were doing. We're now producing so much content, and it's all the same. And I would love the idea that we could have a Raw back to 2 hours. Obviously, 3 hours is too long. I would love the idea where the Raw wasn't promo match, replays of every promo match, and then more promos and matches. I would love the idea that we could almost do what Tom Green did and change how we watch it, which is kind of the point of 98, I think, where Vince Russo took every single part of the rule book and went, well, let's go the other way. So we can't rip the rule book up anymore because Vince has already ripped up the rule book. So putting you on the spot, because I didn't prep you for this, what change do we make to make wrestling? Because you're a wrestling fan, yeah, you find WWE unwatchable. in large part. AEW is largely, for me, unwatchable because it differs so much from what I'm used to. So we have almost this divide. How do we bring wrestling to the point where it's new, but we don't alienate everybody? Because you don't want to have trampolines. There was actually a wrestling company, Teddy Hart, set up where the corners were trampolines because he wanted to do more stunts. And I thought that was the death of professional wrestling. And then we had, Nick Gage, convicted criminal, who basically had a match with David Arquette last year and properly attacked him, and cut him open to the point where David Arquette thought he was going to die. So other than going hyper realism, New Jack on cocaine shit, where do we go? Because I don't think there's anything we haven't seen.
I think we need to get the wrestlers to start training more. Like, you've got some stars that are just lazy, some that can't wrestle, not naming any names. You've got guys, you've got stars who don't care about their opponent when the whole point of wrestling is not to hurt each other, but yet stars like...
You discussing Nia Jax here and what she did to Kairi Sane?
I was literally a way to say stars like Nia Jax, who, 1, lazy, 2, doesn't care about her opponent, and 3, in my opinion, not the best wrestler.
Do you think she's there because of who her relative is?
I think it could be.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think I have a solution to a lot of the ills of wrestling, and that is to work on character. Now, we had a fix for it from the 1930s all the way through until 97, 98. I think we need to see the return, not of valets, although I'm all for having attractive women at ringside. I think we need to return to the days where we have managers. They tried it with Abraham Washington, who was a great speaker. The fact they had him with a live mic during matches, brilliant. And then he said something controversial. I think it was about Kobe Bryant, and he got fired instantly. He got backstage and was fired that night, apparently. I think we need to return to managers. I think building stables, building the ideas that worked once can work again. Paul Heyman should have had an alliance in WWE. They tried it and they put in the wrong people. Curtis Axel was not a Paul Heyman guy. Cesaro, not a Paul Heyman guy. Both good in their own way. Brock Lesnar should have had a stable underneath him. Every MMA and boxing talent have guys that come with them. So you book, David Hay, you get 2 or 3 guys that train at his gym and they're fighting on his undercard, and they fight on every undercard. And I think that the WWE could really benefit from management as an actual thing. They have hired a few guys and a few girls who can wrestle and manage. So developmental is working on management, and that could be something huge. I know Chelsea Green's got Robbie E from TNA as her, Impact, as her manager. He can talk. He can talk forever. Management could be the way that we go. Management could be the way we go so that people get a chance to get out there and get polished. Because I think as great as NXT is, it's hurting the business because people don't learn. You look at Drew McIntyre. I think this will be the last point we discuss. Drew McIntyre, for me, describes everything that is wrong with NXT. Here's a guy who went through FCW, went to the main roster, and lost all faith and was fired. And the way that he got better was picked himself up and he went around all the different promotions that would work with him, including WrestleZone here in Aberdeen, ICW in Glasgow. He worked for What Culture. He worked in Germany. He worked everywhere that would have him because he wanted to be out in front of a crowd. He wanted to learn how to get better. And I think we don't have the ability for folk to get better. I mean, one of the problems is, folk book the same match on every single card for a year. And then people wonder why, when WWE sign up 10 guys from the UK independent scene, there's nothing left. Drew sums that up. When Drew left ICW, everybody said, oh, ICW's done for. They don't have any big stars. And then instantly, due to circumstances, ICW did move into smaller venues. ICW did reboot the company a little bit, but they're still going. They still put on shows that I've been to a live show. I've heard the fan base, and it's hard to disagree it's hard to disagree that ICW may be performing in front of different crowds, but the crowds are still coming.
Yeah.
Drew learned how to get over, and there's a lot of guys at ICW have had to bust their ass working. I mean, some of the guys at ICW, like Krieger, Kid Fight, they work family shows. They work, the Butlins, the Pontins type of shows as well. So these are guys who are doing a bit of everything, and they're well-rounded performers. And you look in America, and you've got Mike Bennett, who's a great in-ring performer. Mike's skills are lacking. You look at Cesaro, who, if he had more personality when that microphone got turned on, he would be over. And you put him with a manager, and you can maybe tackle that. Paul Heyman sounds like a good fix. There's nobody else. There's nobody to manage. And I think, there's so many things wrong. No freedom for performers. Nobody learns how to screw up. And then we have no managers that can actually help those guys. Even Sid had a manager in WWF. Okay, it was Harvey Whippleman, but he still had a manager.
Better than nothing. Like going back to the whole Cesaro thing, I think this is why they've got Sami Zayn to do 95% of the talking.
Yeah.
In that stable. You've got Cesaro, whose English is really pretty good, but he can't talk for shit.
Yeah.
You've got Shinsuke, who, not the greatest English speaker.
Haven't met him though. His English is, like, if you're standing having a conversation with him, he, unless you're Scottish like I am, he can understand you. He can hear what you're saying, and he knows how to respond. So I think it's difficult to learn. I mean, one of the things that you've done some wrestling training in the past, but you were given very little training with a microphone, and I know some companies are working hard on that. But the training on talking is really lacking. And as much as I want to say the in-ring stuff is great, you look at 98 and 99 WWF, there's a lot of good wrestlers there. Stone Cold was a great wrestler at one point. The Rock, his sharpshooter is pretty lame. But you look at all these talents, and they all got over on character. Because Austin, by the time 2000 came around, Austin was broken man. The Rock got over on character. You look down the card, Owen Hart was never a great talker, and he reached that ceiling. The talkers are the ones that get over. So, yeah, I think talking has to be the way we fix it. And man, could you imagine sitting in a car with Paul Heyman for 6 hours, 3 nights a week? There's no way you can't learn from that guy if you're sitting and he's telling you stuff. And I think, yeah, maybe that's part of the problem. I mean, now you've got guys who sit playing the Switch or sit playing games on their phone. Whereas back in the day, I mean, have you heard the stories about the Click? So Sean, Razor, Diesel, X-Pac, when he was 1-2-3 Kid, and then Hunter later on, they all rode together and they would talk about their matches. And they would say what worked, what didn't, why it worked, why it didn't. And I can't fail to look at guys who now travel on their own, or they just travel in pairs, and both guys have got 2 years experience. Who are they learning from? They're learning from each other, and they don't know anything. And I think when I ask people, how do you fix wrestling? I would love to have that answer, because I thought the answer was management. And then I was like, well, actually freedom. And then actually learn to talk. So, yeah, how do you fix wrestling? I don't think you can now. Do we get the Men in Black gimmick and just wipe everybody's memory and then tell everybody it's real again? Because if you spend 20 years telling everybody wrestling is real, although that's the thing, you were saying earlier on, it's about wrestlers working together, making sure you don't get hurt, putting on a show. But now you've got people who go out there and they deliberately hurt each other because it looks better, but it looks like shit. And I know there's somebody who we both speak to who's a really big fan of Japanese wrestling, but it doesn't draw. And I love some of the wrestling that comes out of Japan. It's brutal, it's hard hitting. If you look at old stuff, Dynamite Kid and Tiger Mask. But do you think that Sandra sitting in the pub is going to be talking about Kenny Omega versus Okada, or is she going to be sitting down the pub talking about John Cena and Bray Wyatt? I mean, we know which is the better match, but character is massive. And I think when you look at 98, every person on the card is so over, has such a big character, to the point where you even look at D'Lo Brown and you see him as a star.